So when purchasing my first investment property, should I purchase a cheaper property? Now, this all depends on the individual themselves, okay? When you're buying, or when you're building a property portfolio, if you've got ambitions and you're going to build a portfolio that's going to get you a certain amount of income so you can retire at a certain age, and then, you know, be financially secure, okay, there's a goal that you're probably going to have to get maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 properties or whatever it may be, depending on your goals and how ambitious you are. Now, the next thing you got to take in consideration, the broker is a big part of this journey, the accountant, and then the buyer's agent, because the buyer's agent is going to help you, assist you, and find you that type of property that you're trying to chase. Okay, now, there's things that you got to take in consideration. Now, take this as general advice. I don't know everyone's situation, so I'm not going to say what sort of property you need, what price point, because I don't know your personal situation, but there's things you got to take in consideration. The first thing is, you know, what's your borrowing capacity? What is your limit? Okay, now if you go to a broker, they can tell you, you know, you can borrow X amount. You go to different banks or brokers that work with different banks and a large panel of banks. You know, sometimes a tier 2 or tier 3 bank can give you a little bit more borrowing capacity as well. But next thing as well, what you got to find out is your interest rate. Okay, and then what's your strategy? You go on interest only or principal and interest for the first property? Okay, and that's something you got to take in consideration. Next thing is, are you investing in a company or a trust? Because, you know, if you're someone that's going to build an empire, you know, there's a stage where you're going to get into your journey where you're going to have to go down that route. Okay, and you got to speak to your accountant on that and your broker, and you got to understand the pros and cons of this as well. And that depending on how fast you want to move. If you're someone that's going to move fast and you're in a position where you can kind of move fast because you've got a lot of savings, that's going to help. Next thing is, you got to see how much you've got in savings. So you know you got $60,000 in savings. Okay, perfect. You know what you've got. But if someone's got a little bit more, that will change, of course, with the purchase price and what you can kind of, you know, go out there and purchase. You got to find that as well. Next thing is your monthly savings, because the more you know about your savings and how much you're saving per month, then you're going to see if it's 6 months or 12 months down the track, you're going to have X amount of money in your bank account, and that's going to help change a lot of things, because you're going to use that money to put off to offset accounts or use it to purchase more property. And next thing is your household income, which is one of the most important things. Now, if you're doing this by yourself individually, that's okay. If you're doing it for a spouse, of course, that's going to help with the borrowing capacity as well. So that's where your income will increase and the borrowing capacity will increase as well. And that means you can be able to get into more property. Now, sometimes I see people, they got large borrowing capacities, but they haven't got much savings, and they're very good income earners, and they're earning, you know, 6 figures or more. 6 figures, you know, pretty in the high 6 figures. And they haven't got a good borrowing capacity to some degree, or not good borrowing capacity, sorry, good saving amount, because they're spending a lot of money. So there's a lot of factors, a lot of moving pieces to this. And so someone, let's say, let's run a scenario. Like, let's say someone, you're earning $60,000 or $65,000 a year. Okay. And let's say you've got, say, 70 grand in savings. Okay. You've probably got a borrowing capacity. I don't know what the borrowing capacity is. Let's say you got something at 450, you know, depending on the circumstances, depending on how much you're saving, depending on how many debts or other liabilities that you have as well. If you're renting, if you've got finance on a car, or if you've got some, you know, student debt or whatever it may be, then that's going to take in consideration as well. And you got to make sure you're not overstretching yourself. So then you got to speak to your broker, and they're going to see, okay, well, what sort of asset do you need? Do you need something a bit more of a cash flow assets a bit more stronger, so it's not going to cost you too much in repayments every single month? But as well, of course, it's going to be a growth asset as well, where if it's someone that's an individual, let's say they're earning $120 a year, okay, and they've got, say, $70,000, the same amount of savings as the other person that's at $60,000. Now, they might be able to take on a little bit more of I guess, not as a stronger yield, so the yield might not be as strong, and the purchase price might be able to go up a little bit more, and that's because they can financially, you know, support, pay for the property, and maybe they haven't got as many expenses, okay, let's say, or they haven't got like a large amount of expenses, similar to the person that's $65,000 earning a year. They can probably maybe get a purchase price that's a little bit, you know, higher, or compared to the person that's at the $60,000 earning a year, because their saving rate might not be as strong as the person at 120. So there's a lot of things you take in consideration, and then of course the other people here at 120 can afford a bit more of a higher repayment per month. Okay, so these things that we'll take in consideration. Then of course, then of course, if you're someone that's not a good saver, okay, let's say individual, you're not a good saver, maybe, yeah, you might need a cash flow asset's more stronger. Maybe something that's yielding 7%, 8%, that people, they're attracted to these massive yields, which is all good and well. But sometimes those sort of assets, you might be chasing a property in a rural town that's getting a really high yield, and it's not going to grow very, very strong. Or maybe you're chasing a good duplex in a really strong growth market, but of course, it's not going to grow nothing like if you bought a house in that market that is going to perform even stronger from a capital growth perspective. So the pros and cons with that is you got a duplex, it's yielding 8%, let's say, bringing in a few $1,000s with the current interest rates. Okay, yeah, you got a few $1,000s coming in, positive cash flow, but the growth is not going to be as strong as a residential property in the same market that's just a freestanding house. That's going to have more attributes to grow faster. And why? Because owner-occupiers, families that go out there and want to buy a home, they push the prices up. People that live in units and apartments, yes, the markets do grow, but nothing like a residential property, freestanding house. We have purchased duplexes that have grown 30% or more in a year, okay? But in saying that, you got to understand this long sustainable growth is nothing like what it's going to be with a freestanding house. So what my point here is, I'm saying if someone is not a very good saver, they've got a low income or average income, then okay, what we may have to do is get into a more of a growth asset, because they're not going to be able to save their way to wealth. Listen to those words. You can't save your way to wealth. So what we're doing is the growth asset is going to grow. We're going to take out equity and use that to get into our second asset. Where if someone individually, let's say they're earning six figures, they can get into a growth asset that's going to help them propel them and get into another asset. But not just that, they've got maybe they've got some good savings as well. Maybe there's a possibility we might have to go as well into a cash flow asset, which might be a duplex. And the reason why I say that is because if you're going to again get a freestanding house as your first or second investment, depending, that house may be not as strong as a cash flow asset because it might be yielding 5 or 4%. Okay, and the property that you're going to get is a duplex might be yielding 7% or 8%, and that's going to help offset that property there as well, and that's going to help with your borrowing capacity. So there's a lot of things to consider. I can actually talk about this for hours with someone on a podcast or something like that. Would be pretty cool. Or probably we can do a live about this, because a 1% difference in as well yields can change your borrowing capacity as well. Okay, and that's something to take in consideration, because if you purchase a property at a 4% yield and you purchase a property at a 6% yield, okay, and they're both at say $450K purchase price, the one that's yielding at 6%, it's going to help you financially from a borrowing perspective to get into another property. So this is where it gets very tricky, because everyone's situation is completely different, and it's just having a look and saying, okay, maybe this person here, depending on their circumstances, may need to get a property at a certain price point and a certain yield to help them get into the next purchase, where the other individual needs a different property at a different yield and a different price point, and they can take on a little bit of a larger price point because of their circumstances as well. Okay. Hopefully that gives you a bit of clarity. It's not an easy question to ask. Or to answer. Sorry. It's something that depends on your circumstances. So don't take this as personal advice, as this is just general advice. I'm just trying to give you guys as much clarity as possible and understanding, what you need to look out for. As soon as you understand and learn about the game of finance when it comes to property, that's when you become your financial IQ will start to increase, and you understand, okay, what sort of asset do I kind of need to get me to closer to my goal? Because the first asset you get, okay, is going to get you, it's a stepping stone for the next one, and then the next one's going to be a stepping stone for the next one, and this is how you want to get into your properties one after the other in a short period of time. Where if you make a mistake on the first property and it doesn't get you to your goal as fast as possible, okay, then that's where you're going to take a bit of a hit. Because like I said, if you're someone that's not a very good saver, but you're earning 60 grand a year or something like that, and you get a property that's, let's say, something like a duplex, now it will grow if you use the right fundamentals, the right strategy, and you understand property analysis and how to read a market, and it grows, yes. But if it doesn't grow enough to get equity in a short period of time, let's say in the next 2 years, then you're going to have to wait maybe the third or fourth year. That's time in the market that you've missed out on. Where if you purchased an asset that was more of a growth asset, freestanding house, it grew after 12 months, you took out equity and went again, because you're not a very good saver, or you haven't got a very strong income to save on a great monthly budget, it's going to affect you for your next purchase. Whereas, like I said before, if you're someone that's earning 6 figures or more, you're a very good saver. You got a bit of savings as well, and you get into your first property, and maybe you get your first property, and we get a freestanding house, or we get a duplex because of your circumstances. Then what will happen is you're saving, X amount of money as well from this property. Not just that, you're saving a lot from your personal income because you're earning a little bit higher wage. You can save a little bit more. The property's still growing. Let's say 12 months down the track, or 18 months down the track, you've saved X amount. The property's put you in a better position. You've got your next property, which is going to be more a freestanding house. That property there can be a property that's got a weaker yield, not as strong of a yield, but it's got more of a stronger growth point, okay? And then that property is going to get you into your next one. And the idea of that is balancing out the portfolio, because if we just get freestanding houses, growth assets, yes, they are good, strong growth assets, but then the strong cash flow is not going to be there. And that's where we want to start tiptoeing our way up to bigger assets down the track, because we want to start getting to blocks of units. We want to start getting commercial properties. And those sort of properties will help pay down debts and help give us the financial freedom income. But the growth is what's going to get you there as well. So, probably gone a bit of a tangent, gone off a little bit topics here and there. But the price point, it depends on your circumstances. Speak to your broker, speak to your accountants, have your buyer's agent there, and put a plan in place, tailor to your situation, and understand what sort of property that I need to get into the next property, which is the most important thing. Okay? Hopefully this video, you liked it. Hopefully you got a lot of value from it. Hopefully you learned something new. I can't answer this question for everyone. It's something that I can talk about it for hours upon hours, because it's such a fascinating topic. Okay, so thank you guys for watching this, and hopefully you got a lot of value, and we'll see you for next week's poll.